The victory in the simulation brought Leora no comfort. If anything, it made her position more precarious. Emperor Kel's forced smile lingered in her mind, a mask hiding a storm of anger and mistrust. She knew better than to think she'd earned his respect. Instead, she'd marked herself as a threat. And threats in Kel's empire were dealt with swiftly and brutally. Back in her quarters later that evening, Leora replayed the events of the day in her head. The Emperor's chilling announcement about oblivion weighed heavily on her conscience. Destroying an entire colony for suspicion alone wasn't just immoral, it was monstrous. But stopping him wouldn't be easy. She needed allies, resources, and a plan bold enough to challenge the most powerful man in the galaxy. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Slipping her blaster into its holster, she opened it cautiously. To her surprise, Captain Rin stood there, dressed in plain clothes, and looking every bit like someone trying not to draw attention. His sharp features softened slightly when he saw her. "You're either brave or stupid showing up here," Leora said dryly, stepping aside to let him in. "Maybe both," Rin replied with a smirk, closing the door behind him. "I heard about your little showdown with the Emperor. Impressive." Leora rolled her eyes but didn't deny it. "What do you want, Karis?" "I'm here to offer you a way out," he said, his tone turning serious. "You've seen what Kel's capable of. You know what oblivion means. Join us. Help us take him down before he destroys everything." Leora crossed her arms, studying him carefully. "And why should I trust you?" "Because we're running out of time," Rin shot back. "Every second we waste debating is another second Kale gets closer to pulling the trigger. We need someone like you, someone who knows how the Empire works, who can rally others to our cause." For a long moment, Leora said nothing. The weight of the decision pressed down on her shoulders. Betraying the Empire meant abandoning everything she'd worked for, risking her life, and possibly dooming those who still believed in her leadership. But staying loyal meant becoming complicit in atrocities she couldn't stomach. Finally, she exhaled sharply. "Fine. But if I'm doing this, we play by my rules. No reckless gambits, no half-baked plans." Rin grinned, clearly relieved. "Deal. Now, let's test your commitment." 2 days later, Leora found herself aboard a stolen transport ship alongside Rin and a small team of rebels. Their mission: sabotage an Imperial weapons depot, supplying the fleet near the Outer Rim. It was risky, but successful strikes would weaken Kel's forces while sending a message to wavering Imperial officers considering defection. As they approached the depot under cover of darkness, Leora took charge. "Stick to the plan," she whispered over comms. "Minimal casualties, maximum damage." "Got it." The operation went smoothly. At first, they infiltrated the facility undetected, planting explosives in key locations. But just as they prepared to retreat, alarms blared. Imperial troops swarmed the area, cutting off their escape route. "We've got company," one rebel shouted, firing at incoming soldiers. Leora cursed under her breath. "Fall back to extraction point, Elta." "Rin, cover me." Dodging blaster fire, she sprinted toward the control room, hacking into the system to lock the doors behind them and buy time. Rin fought fiercely beside her, his dual pistols blazing as he held off waves of enemies. Together, they reached the rendezvous point moments before reinforcements arrived. As their ship lifted off, explosions lit up the night sky below. Leora watched the chaos unfold, a grim satisfaction settling in her chest. This was only the beginning. Back on board their hidden base, a battered cruiser drifting through asteroid fields, celebrations broke out among the rebels. For the first time, they dared to hope. But Leora remained quiet, staring out at the stars. Trust had been forged tonight, but betrayal often followed close behind. Still, she allowed herself a faint smile. "Guess I really am holding my beer now," she muttered to herself. The time had come. With the Ghost Fleet united once more and their ranks bolstered by defectors from the Empire, Leora Valen knew they couldn't delay any longer. Oblivion loomed like a shadow over the galaxy, its eye-controlled systems primed to annihilate entire star systems at Kel's command. Every day it remained operational was another day billions lived in fear. The only solution was to destroy it. And that meant infiltrating the heavily fortified space station, where the superweapons core resided. "This isn't just another mission," Leora said during the briefing aboard the Eclipse. Her voice carried the weight of finality as she addressed her crew. "Oblivion is the heart of Kel's tyranny. If we succeed, we strike a blow he can't recover from. But if we fail," she didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood the stakes. Rin stood beside her, his usual cocky grin replaced by grim determination. "We've got one shot at this," he added. "No second chances." The plan was audacious, even for Leora. Using stolen Imperial codes and disguised ships, the Ghost Fleet would pose as reinforcements sent to bolster the station's defenses. Once inside, small strike teams would disable key systems, while Leora led a direct assault on the core chamber. It was risky, but their intel suggested the station's automated defenses could be overridden with enough ingenuity and luck. When the operation began, tension crackled through the air. Disguised as an Imperial officer, Leora stood at the helm of the lead ship, her pulse racing as they approached the massive structure orbiting a desolate moon. The station bristled with weapons turrets and shield generators, its surface crawling with patrols. For a moment, doubt flickered in her mind. What if they were walking into a trap? But then came the signal. Access granted. Their forged credentials worked. As the hangar bay doors opened, Leora exhaled sharply. Phase 1 was complete. Inside, chaos erupted almost immediately. Imperial forces quickly realized something was wrong when rebel insignias appeared beneath disguises. Blaster fire filled the corridors as strike teams fanned out, disabling security systems and sabotaging power relays. Leora moved with precision, her team clearing rooms and holding off waves of droids and stormtroopers. "Core chamber is 2 levels up," she shouted over comms, checking her map. "Keep moving." Every step felt heavier than the last. Reinforcements poured in, forcing them to fight harder and faster. Rin's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Leora, we're running out of time. They've locked down the main access routes. Then find another way." She snapped back, ducking behind cover as explosions rocked the hallway. "We're not stopping now." Her resolve hardened as memories of obliterated colonies flashed in her mind. This wasn't just about winning. It was about justice. For every life lost, for every world destroyed, she vowed to make Cal pay. Finally, they reached the core chamber, but not without cost. Half her team lay injured or dead, and exhaustion weighed heavily on those still standing. Inside, the hum of machinery echoed ominously. At the center of the room sat Oblivion's control console, its glowing interface pulsing like a heartbeat. Leora approached cautiously, uploading a virus designed to overload the system and render it useless. Progress bars crawled across the screen, each second feeling like an eternity. Then alarms blared. Someone had triggered the station's self-destruct sequence. "Leora, you need to get out of there," Rin yelled frantically. "I'm not leaving until this thing is dead." She shot back, her fingers flying across the controls. "Just hold them off for 5 more minutes." As the countdown ticked down, Leora refused to budge. When the virus finally took hold, the core shuddered violently, sparks flying as circuits overloaded. A triumphant grin spread across her face, until Emperor Cal himself burst into the chamber, flanked by elite guards. "You think you've won," he snarled, raising his weapon. "You've only delayed the inevitable." Leora stepped forward, her expression calm despite the chaos around them. "Maybe," she said evenly, "but I'll make sure you don't live to see it." With seconds left on the clock, the battle between General and Emperor began. A clash that would decide the fate of the galaxy. The explosion of the Oblivion Station lit up the void like a second sun, its fiery debris scattering across space. For a moment, The crew aboard the Eclipse watched in silence as the remnants of Kal's tyranny burned away into nothingness. It was over. Emperor Kal was dead, and his superweapon had been reduced to cosmic dust. Yet, amidst the relief, tension lingered. The galaxy wasn't safe yet. Lyora sat slumped in her seat, still catching her breath after the harrowing escape. Her body ached from the fight, and her mind raced with everything she'd seen and done. She glanced at Rin, who gave her a reassuring nod before turning back to the controls. "We're not out of this yet," he said grimly. "Kal may be gone, but his loyalists aren't." He was right. Even as the news of Kal's death spread across the galaxy, chaos erupted. Imperial factions splintered, some vowing revenge while others scrambled to consolidate power. Entire systems descended into anarchy as decades of oppression unraveled overnight. The rebels had won a monumental victory, but rebuilding would require more than just dismantling the old order. It demanded creating something new. "First things first," Lyora said, standing despite her exhaustion. "We need to regroup and assess our situation. We got wounded, limited supplies, and no idea how many Imperial forces are still hunting us." She called for a meeting in the command center, gathering key members of the Ghost Fleet. The room buzzed with conflicting emotions, hope mingled with fear, triumph shadowed by uncertainty. Lyora took her place at the head of the table, leaning heavily on her hands. Her voice rang clear when she spoke. "Today, we struck a blow that will echo through history. But tomorrow is where the real work begins." One officer raised his hand hesitantly. "What do we do now, General? Without Kal, there's no central authority. Who leads?" Lyora paused, considering the question carefully. "No one person should lead," she replied firmly. "That's how tyrants rise. Instead, we build alliances between planets, factions, even former enemies. Together, we create something better. A federation, not another empire." Her words ignited murmurs of agreement, though skepticism lingered. Some doubted whether unity could ever replace centuries of division. Others worried about retaliation from surviving Imperial fleets. To address these concerns, Lyora outlined a bold plan. They would travel to key systems, rallying support and establishing provisional governments to maintain stability until a formal council could be formed. But their journey wouldn't be easy. As they plotted their course, reports came in of Imperial ships converging near their location. Kal might have fallen, but his followers weren't ready to surrender. "They'll come for us," Lyora warned. "And when they do, we'll be ready." Over the next few days, the Ghost Fleet prepared for battle, repairing damaged vessels and fortifying defenses. Morale remained high thanks to Lyora's unwavering determination. She walked among her crew, offering encouragement and sharing stories of hope. "Remember why we started this," she told them. "Not for revenge, but for freedom, for a future worth fighting for." When the Imperial fleet finally arrived, it was larger than expected. Outnumbered and outgunned, the Ghost Fleet faced its greatest test yet. But instead of retreating, Lyora devised a daring strategy. Using the asteroid field as cover, they lured enemy ships into narrow passages, exploiting their lack of maneuverability. Ambushes turned the tide, and by the time reinforcements from allied rebel cells joined the fray, the Imperials were forced to retreat. As the last enemy ship fled, cheers erupted aboard the Eclipse. They'd survived against all odds, not because of superior firepower, but because of courage, ingenuity, and unity. Lyora stood on the bridge, watching the stars shimmer beyond the viewport. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in years, she felt hopeful. Turning to Rin, she smirked faintly. "Guess holding my beer paid off after all." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Just promise me you'll take a break once we save the galaxy." She laughed softly, knowing deep down that saving the galaxy was only the beginning. The core chamber was a maelstrom of chaos. Sparks rained down from overloaded circuits as Oblivion's systems collapsed, and the station's self-destruct sequence ticked closer to zero. Amidst the destruction, Leora Valen faced Emperor Kale, her blaster drawn and her resolve unshaken. The man who had orchestrated so much suffering stood before her now, his cold eyes gleaming with fury. "You're too late," Kale sneered, raising his own weapon, a sleek, cybernetically enhanced blaster that hummed with energy. "Even if you destroy this station, my legacy will endure. Humanity is weak, General. They need control, order. Without me, they'll devour themselves." Leora didn't flinch. "Your idea of order is slavery," she shot back, her voice steady despite the deafening alarms around them. "You don't save people by destroying them. You just prove how broken you are." Kale let out a bitter laugh. "Broken? No, I'm the only one who sees clearly. And now you'll die knowing your rebellion achieved nothing." With that, he fired. Leora dove behind a shattered console, the blast narrowly missing her head. She returned fire, forcing him to take cover. His elite guards lay dead or incapacitated, cut down during the initial breach, but Kale himself fought like a cornered predator, relentless and calculating. The battle unfolded in flashes of light and bursts of noise. Kale used his superior reflexes to anticipate her moves, closing the distance between them with terrifying speed. Leora countered with quick thinking and improvisation, using debris and collapsing structures to her advantage. When he lunged at her with a blade hidden in his gauntlet, she sidestepped just in time, countering with a kick that sent him stumbling. "You can't win," Kale roared, his voice tinged with desperation. He activated another layer of his armor's defenses, creating a shimmering energy shield around him. Blaster shots ricocheted harmlessly off its surface. But Leora wasn't deterred. Instead of aiming directly at him, she targeted the environment, overloading nearby panels and triggering secondary explosions. One blast knocked Kale off balance, shattering his shield generator. For the first time, vulnerability flickered across his face. "You've lost, Kale," she said, stepping forward as the countdown reached its final minute. "Your empire is crumbling. Your weapon is gone. All you have left is fear, and even that won't save you." Kale staggered upright, blood trickling from a wound on his forehead. "Fear keeps people alive," he spat. "Without it, they're animals. Chaos follows freedom. Mark my words, you'll see." "No," Leora replied firmly. "Freedom isn't chaos. It's hope, something you'll never understand." Summoning every ounce of strength, she closed the gap between them, engaging him in hand-to-hand combat. Despite his enhancements, Cal's movements grew sluggish, weighed down by exhaustion and injuries. In a final surge, Leora disarmed him, pinning him to the ground with her boot pressed against his chest. "This ends now," she said coldly, pointing her blaster at him. For a moment, Kale stared up at her, hatred burning in his eyes. Then, with a twisted smile, he whispered, "So be it." Before Leora could react, Kale triggered a fail-safe device on his wrist, a last-ditch effort to ensure his death wouldn't go unavenged. The entire station trembled violently as additional charges detonated throughout the structure. "Leora, we're out of time." Rin's panicked voice crackled over comms. "Get out of there." "I'm not leaving without finishing this," she muttered under her breath. With one swift motion, she fired a single shot, ending Cal's reign forever. But the station was already falling apart around her. She sprinted toward the exit, dodging falling debris and collapsing floors. Her lungs burned, and her legs screamed in protest, but she pushed through the pain. As she reached the hangar bay, Rin was waiting for her in their ship, engines roaring. "Go, go, go," he shouted as she leaped aboard. Seconds later, they cleared the station's atmosphere just as it erupted into a fiery inferno behind them. Oblivion and Kale were no more. Breathing heavily, Leora sank into her seat, staring at the wreckage fading into the void. The galaxy was scared, but for the first time in years, there was a chance to rebuild, not under tyranny, but under hope. Rin glanced at her, smiling faintly. Guess you really didn't need anyone to hold your beer after all. Leora smirked, though tears glistened in her eyes. Nope. Just needed to hold on to what mattered. The fallout from the Halorcording's release rippled through the galaxy like a supernova. Emperor Kale's crimes were laid bare for all to see, and his once unshakable grip on power began to crumble. Protesters filled the streets of Imperial worlds, demanding justice. Even within the ranks of the Empire, dissent brewed as officers questioned their loyalty to a man who had ordered the deaths of innocents without remorse. For Leora Valen and the Ghost Fleet, the victory was bittersweet. While the rebellion gained momentum, cracks started forming within their own coalition. Not everyone trusted Leora fully. Some saw her as an outsider, a former Imperial officer whose loyalties might still lie with the enemy. Others resented Rin Karis for his growing influence over her decisions. Tensions simmered just below the surface, threatening to boil over at any moment. It came to a head during a heated meeting aboard the Eclipse. The topic? Their next move. Some argued for striking directly at Oblivion, aiming to destroy the superweapon before it could be used again. Others insisted they focus on rallying more defectors from the Imperial fleet, strengthening their numbers before taking such a risky step. "We can't afford to wait," snapped Commander Terran, one of the rebels' fiercest leaders. Her eyes burned with anger as she glared at Leora. "Every second we waste gives Cal time to retaliate. If you're too scared to act, maybe someone else should take charge." Leora clenched her fists but kept her voice steady. "I'm not scared," she said, locking eyes with Terran. "But charging in blind won't help us win this war. We need precision, not recklessness. And yet you spend more time whispering with him than listening to your own people." Terran shot back, pointing accusingly at Rin. Before things could escalate further, Rin stepped between them. "Enough," he said firmly. "Arguing among ourselves is exactly what Kel wants. We don't have time for infighting." But the damage was done. Doubts lingered, festering like an open wound. Leora knew she had to act fast to regain control or risk losing everything. Days later, disaster struck. During a routine supply run, several Ghost Fleet ships were ambushed by Imperial forces. Casualties were high, and critical resources were lost. Suspicion immediately fell on a mole within their ranks. Someone had leaked their coordinates to the Empire, and paranoia spread like wildfire. Determined to root out the traitor, Leora devised a risky plan. She announced that she would surrender herself to Kale, claiming she'd grown disillusioned with the rebellion and wanted amnesty. In reality, she intended to use the ruse to gather intel and expose the spy. Rin confronted her privately before she left. "This is insane," he said, pacing anxiously. "If Kale catches you, he'll kill you." "He won't catch me," Leora replied calmly. "Besides, if I don't do this, the fleet will tear itself apart. Trust me." Reluctantly, Rin agreed to play along. As word of Leora's supposed betrayal spread, whispers reached Cal's ears. He summoned her to his palace world, eager to gloat over her downfall. Inside the opulent throne room, Cal smirked as Leora knelt before him. "So the great General Valen has finally seen reason," he sneered. "What brought about this change of heart?" "You did," Leora said smoothly, keeping her tone humble. "Your vision for peace convinced me." Kale laughed cruelly. "Flattery won't save you. Tell me, what does the rebellion plan next?" Leora hesitated just long enough to seem uncertain, then revealed fabricated details about an upcoming attack. Meanwhile, hidden surveillance tech recorded every interaction, including coded messages sent by one of Cal's advisors confirming the leak originated from within the Ghost Fleet. When Leora returned to the fleet, she presented irrefutable evidence. The mole was Commander Terran. Confronted with proof, Terran confessed she'd been promised wealth and status if she helped bring down the rebellion. Furious, the crew expelled her, restoring unity to the fleet. As they regrouped, Leora allowed herself a small smile. "Guess holding my beer means cleaning house sometimes," she muttered to Rain. The road ahead remained perilous, but for now, The Ghost Fleet stood stronger than ever. And Lyora? She wasn't done fighting. Not by a long shot. Night had fallen over the Aegis, and most of the diplomats and officers had retired to their quarters. But General Lyora Valen wasn't one for rest, when answers lay just out of reach. The mention of the Endgame protocol during the summit gnawed at her like a splinter under her skin. She couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just a rumor, it was real, and it was dangerous. Lyora moved silently through dimly lit corridors, avoiding patrols with practiced ease. Her destination: the restricted archives buried deep within the flagship's core. Accessing them required clearance far above her rank, but Lyora had always been resourceful. Years ago, she taught herself advanced hacking techniques as a hobby, never imagining they'd become vital tools in moments like this. Tonight, those skills were about to pay off. The door to the archive chamber slid open with a soft hiss after she bypassed its security systems, using a handheld device cobbled together from spare parts. Inside, rows of holographic data terminals glowed faintly, each containing classified information spanning centuries of Imperial history. Lyora wasted no time, pulling up records tied to recent high-priority projects. Her fingers flew across the console as keywords flashed before her eyes. Oblivion. That name kept appearing again and again, linked to something called the Endgame Protocol. At first glance, it seemed innocuous, a weapons system designed for planetary defense. But digging deeper revealed chilling details. Oblivion wasn't just any weapon. It was an eye-controlled superweapon capable of annihilating entire star systems. Worse still, logs showed it had already been deployed near the outer rim, waiting for activation orders. Lyora's heart pounded as she pieced together the truth. This wasn't a theoretical contingency plan. It was operational. Emperor Kell had already set the stage for mass destruction, targeting rebel-held worlds without mercy. The implications hit her like a freighter crashing into an asteroid field. Billions of lives hung in the balance, all because of one man's paranoia. Just as she downloaded the files onto a secure drive, alarms blared throughout the ship. Someone must have noticed unauthorized access. Cursing under her breath, Lyora yanked the drive free and sprinted toward the exit. Security drones swarmed the hallway ahead, forcing her to take a detour through maintenance tunnels. Every second counted now. As she emerged on the lower decks, adrenaline surged through her veins. Ducking behind cargo crates, she spotted a familiar face approaching. Captain Rin Karis, leader of the rebel faction known as the Crimson Dawn. How he'd managed to infiltrate the Aegis was anyone's guess, but his timing couldn't have been better. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Rin said dryly, his voice low enough not to carry. He wore civilian clothes, blending seamlessly with the crew. "Not a ghost," Lyora replied, tossing him the drive. "This is worse." Rin frowned, examining the device. "What is it?" "Proof that the Emperor's planning genocide," she said grimly. "There's a weapon called Oblivion. It's active, and it's aimed at your people." For a moment, Rin looked shaken, an expression Lyora rarely saw on him. Then determination hardened his features. "If what you're saying is true, we need to act fast. Join us, Lyora. Help us stop this madness." She hesitated, torn between loyalty to her troops and disgust for the empire she served. Finally, she nodded. "Fine, but if I'm doing this, we do it my way." "Deal," Rin said with a smirk. "Though I gotta say, I didn't expect you'd be the type to walk away from power." Lyora shrugged, her lips curling into a wry grin. Power's meaningless if it's built on lies and corpses. Besides, she glanced back at the chaos brewing around them. "I think I'll find plenty of challenges keeping me busy." Together, they slipped into the shadows, leaving behind the gilded halls of the Aegis. For Lyora, there was no turning back now. She'd uncovered the Empire's darkest secret, and whether she liked it or not, she was about to become the spark that ignited rebellion across the galaxy. But first, she needed a plan, and maybe a stiff drink. After all, saving billions of lives while dodging Imperial assassins sounded like the kind of job that required holding your beer. The galaxy was a powder keg, ready to explode. The once mighty Galactic Empire, spanning thousands of star systems, now teetered on the edge of chaos. Its rulers had grown arrogant and cruel, their iron grip tightening as rebellion simmered in the outer reaches. On board the Imperial flagship Aegis, General Leora Valen stood tall amidst a sea of diplomats, admirals, and bureaucrats gathered for an emergency summit. She was an anomaly, a woman in a room full of men who still struggled to accept her authority despite her unmatched record as a military strategist. Leora wasn't like other generals. Her sharp tongue and unorthodox methods often ruffled feathers among the Empire's elite. But no one could deny her brilliance or the loyalty she inspired in her troops. Today, however, she faced her toughest challenge yet. Rumors had spread about something called the Endgame Protocol, a secret weapon rumored to be capable of wiping out entire planets if rebellion escalated. No one knew exactly what it was, or whether it even existed, but fear hung heavy in the air. As the meeting began, Admiral Draven took center stage. A towering figure with a reputation for ruthlessness, he wasted no time asserting dominance. "We cannot afford weakness," he declared, scanning the room with cold eyes. "Rebels must be crushed before they spread their poison further." Leora crossed her arms, leaning casually against the wall. When Draven paused dramatically after his speech, she raised an eyebrow. "Crushed, that's your plan," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. Heads turned toward her, some curious, others annoyed. Draven glared at her, clearly irritated by the interruption. "And what would you suggest, General?" he sneered, emphasizing her title mockingly. "Perhaps another one of your creative strategies." Leora smirked, unfazed. Stepping forward, she let her confident gaze sweep across the room. "Creative is better than predictable," she shot back. "Your so-called crushing approach has only made them stronger. Maybe it's time we tried something smarter." Draven scoffed, shaking his head. "Smarter? Like sending half-trained recruits into battle because you think inspiration can replace discipline." His voice dripped with disdain. "You're reckless, Valen. One day that recklessness will get us all killed." Leora tilted her head slightly, her expression calm but dangerous. Then, without missing a beat, she replied, "Admiral, hold my beer." The room fell silent. For a moment, nobody moved. It was such an absurd thing to say in the middle of a high-stakes political debate that people weren't sure how to react. Some stifled laughter, others exchanged bewildered glances, and a few younger officers openly grinned. Even Draven looked momentarily stunned before regaining his composure. "What did you just say?" he demanded, his face reddening. "You heard me," Leora said, her tone light but laced with steel. "If you've got a problem with my methods, fine. Let's settle this right here, right now. Or are you too scared to take me seriously?" Her words sent ripples through the assembly. Never before had anyone dared to challenge Draven so brazenly, and certainly not in front of the Emperor's advisors. Yet there was something undeniably compelling about Leora's confidence. Even those who disliked her couldn't help but admire her audacity. For now, the tension remained unresolved, but the seeds of defiance had been planted. As the meeting adjourned, whispers filled the corridors. Everyone wondered the same thing. Was Leora Valen truly reckless, or was she exactly the kind of leader the galaxy needed to survive its darkest hour? Little did they know, Leora's casual quip would soon become prophetic, because when the stakes grew higher, she wouldn't hesitate to prove that sometimes holding your beer meant taking on the entire galaxy and winning. The next morning, the tension aboard the Aegis was thicker than ever. Emperor Kale himself had arrived unexpectedly, flanked by his elite guard and a retinue of advisors. His presence sent shockwaves through the flagship. No one dared breathe too loudly in fear of drawing his icy gaze. The Emperor rarely left his palace world unless something monumental was at stake, and today felt like the calm before a storm. Kale called for an emergency assembly in the Grand Hall, summoning every high-ranking officer and diplomat to attend. When Leora entered, she found herself seated uncomfortably close to Admiral Draven, who shot her a smug look as if gloating about yesterday's confrontation. Ignoring him, she focused on Kale, whose piercing eyes scanned the room like a hawk hunting prey. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kale began, his voice smooth but commanding, "we stand at a crossroads. Rebellion threatens to tear apart everything we've built. To preserve order, decisive action is required." He paused dramatically, letting his words sink in. Then came the bombshell. "I have authorized the deployment of Oblivion, a necessary measure to ensure peace and stability. A neutral colony suspected of harboring insurgents will serve as an example. Let this act remind all who oppose us that defiance carries a price." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even Draven looked uneasy, though he quickly masked it with feigned confidence. Leora clenched her fists under the table, anger simmering beneath her composed exterior. Destroying an entire colony for suspicion alone. This wasn't justice, it was slaughter. Before she could stop herself, she stood up, drawing every eye in the room. "Your Majesty," she said, her tone respectful but firm, "may I speak?" Kale raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "By all means, General Valen." "With respect, sir," Leora continued, stepping forward. "Obliterating a colony without concrete evidence risks turning allies into enemies. If you want loyalty, prove their guilt first, or risk losing what little trust remains." Murmurs erupted around the hall. Some nodded in agreement, while others whispered warnings about questioning the Emperor. Kale studied her carefully, his expression unreadable. Finally, he smiled, a cold, calculating smile that made Leora's skin crawl. "You question my judgment, General?" he asked softly, almost amused. "Very well. Prove your worth instead. Defeat me in a simulated combat exercise, and perhaps I'll reconsider." The room fell silent. Everyone knew Kale was infamous for his skill in tactical simulations, enhanced by cybernetic implants that gave him near-perfect reflexes. Challenging him was suicide, but backing down would mean failure. Lyra didn't hesitate. "Gladly, Your Majesty." Minutes later, they stood inside a holographic arena, weapons materializing in their hands. The simulation depicted a dense urban battlefield filled with crumbling buildings and narrow alleyways. Kale moved like lightning, anticipating every move Leora made. But she didn't fight conventionally. Instead, she used the environment to her advantage, dodging behind cover, setting traps, and forcing him to overextend. When Kale cornered her in a ruined plaza, she triggered a hidden explosive charge, collapsing debris between them. As he struggled to navigate the obstacle, she circled around, striking from unexpected angles. By the time the timer ran out, Leora stood victorious, her virtual weapon trained on Kale's avatar. For a moment, Kale simply stared at her, clearly stunned. Then, to everyone's surprise, he laughed. "Impressive, General. Perhaps you're more capable than I thought." But as Leora turned to leave, she leaned closer to him and whispered just loud enough for him to hear, "Next time, don't make me say, 'Hold my beer' twice." Her quip earned stifled chuckles from nearby officers, but Kale's smile faded, replaced by a flicker of irritation. Whatever respect he'd shown vanished instantly. Leora walked away knowing she'd won the battle. But the war was far from over. Word of the weapons depot's destruction spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Imperial propaganda tried to spin it as a minor setback, but whispers of rebellion grew louder. For the first time in years, people dared to imagine a future free from Emperor Kale's tyranny. At the heart of this growing resistance was the newly formed coalition led by General Leora Valen and Captain Rin Karis, a mismatched band of rebels, defectors, smugglers, and idealists who called themselves the Ghost Fleet. Operating out of a hidden base nestled deep within an asteroid field, the Ghost Fleet became a symbol of defiance. Their ships were patched together from salvaged parts, their ranks filled with individuals united not by shared backgrounds, but by a common cause: survival. Under Leora's leadership, they launched precision strikes against key Imperial targets, crippling supply lines, disrupting communications, and spreading hope where despair had once reigned. But Leora knew they couldn't win on raids alone. To truly turn the tide, they needed something bigger, something that would expose Cal's crimes to the entire galaxy. That opportunity came when intel surfaced about hull recordings stored in a secure vault aboard the Imperator's Wrath, one of Cal's personal dreadnoughts. These recordings allegedly contained evidence of his orders for civilian massacres and the activation of Oblivion. "This is our chance," Leora said during a strategy meeting aboard the Ghost Fleet's flagship, the Eclipse. Around her, faces lit up with determination. Even those who doubted her at first now trusted her instincts. "If we can get those files and broadcast them galaxy-wide, we'll shatter whatever legitimacy Cal has left." Rin leaned forward, his sharp eyes narrowing. "It's risky. The Wrath isn't just any ship. It's practically a fortress. Getting close enough to infiltrate will be suicide unless we do it smart." "Smart is what I do best," Leora replied with a wry smile. She turned to a holographic map projected in the center of the room. "We hit them hard and fast. A decoy attack here." She pointed to a nearby Imperial outpost. "We'll draw most of their fighters away. Meanwhile, a small team sneaks aboard, grabs the data, and gets out before reinforcements arrive." The plan was audacious, even reckless, but desperation bred boldness, and the Ghost Fleet had nothing left to lose. When the operation began, chaos erupted. The decoy assault worked perfectly, luring the bulk of the Wrath's forces into battle. Under cover of darkness, Leora led the infiltration team onto the dreadnought using stolen Imperial codes and cloaked shuttles. They moved silently through the corridors, disabling security systems and avoiding patrols with practiced ease. Inside the vault, Leora worked quickly, decrypting the holorcords while the others kept watch. What she found chilled her to the bone. Footage of Kale calmly ordering mass executions, justifying them as sacrifices for the greater good. There were also logs detailing the development of Oblivion, confirming her worst fears. "We've got what we need," she said, uploading the files to a secure drive. "Let's move." As they retraced their steps toward the extraction point, alarms blared throughout the ship. Someone had discovered their presence. Stormtroopers poured into the halls, forcing the team to fight their way out. Blaster bolts ricocheted off walls as Leora shouted orders, her calm demeanor keeping everyone focused despite the chaos. Just as they reached the hangar bay, disaster struck. A squad of elite guards blocked their path, led by none other than Admiral Draven. His face twisted with fury as he raised his weapon. "Traitor," he spat at Leora. "Did you really think you could escape?" Leora didn't flinch. With a quick glance at her team, she stepped forward, hands raised in mock surrender. "Admiral," she said coolly, "you always did underestimate me." Before Draven could react, she triggered a hidden explosive charge planted earlier, collapsing part of the ceiling between them. As debris rained down, she signaled her team to board their shuttle. Moments later, they blasted free of the Wrath, leaving chaos in their wake. Back aboard the Eclipse, Leora wasted no time broadcasting the holorcords across every available channel. Within hours, the truth about Cal's atrocities reached billions of households. Protests erupted on loyalist planets, and even some Imperial officers began questioning their allegiance. For the first time, the Empire faltered, and Leora knew they'd only scratched the surface. The real fight was yet to come.